UnDaoDu, UnDaoDu, UnDaoDu. UnDaoDu, UnDaoDu, UnDaoDu. UnDaoDu, 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 UnDaoDu. UnDaoDu, 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 UnDaoDu. UnDaoDu, UnDaoDu, UnDaoDu. Oh, da, Shibmathra. 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 Mama, can you tell me the stories? Tell me the stories of the Shibmathra. But you are Shibmathra. What do you mean, Mama? You are the great one. You are the last one. You're the one who will usher in the Ouroboros. I don't understand, Mama. It's okay. You will. You're still young. Go. Go play with the dolphins. I looked back at my mom and she was just laying there, comfortably on her side. She was staring at me, as she always did, with this amazing amount of love. I smiled at her and I went pouncing towards the water as quick as I could. I always loved playing with the dolphins. They're always there waiting for me. I loved their soft skin as they brushed up against me. It made me giggle and laugh, and I'd blow bubbles out of my nose, and they would come up. And I found that I could suck in air, and I would go up, and then I'd blow air out, and I'd go down. It was the most amazing thing. It was like I was flying back and forth, up and down. It was so different in the water. I really want to be a dolphin, I thought to myself. Dolphin is cool. They were awoke, like us, meaning that they understood each other. I couldn't really talk to a dolphin, but I understood by looking at the dolphin what they wanted. It was as if we were connected. It would look and look this way, and I'd know, okay, it wants to go that way, and I would go. And then I'd feel one pushing its snout right up my tush and pushing me along. It was such a different world under the water. I would eat the seaweed. Obviously, it was hard underwater. I tried, but I couldn't swallow. It was difficult. But eventually I learned how, and that was fine. I would float up and look towards the beach, and my mother was still there watching. This time, I noticed she was looking off into the distance in deep thought. I struggled, and I got out of the water, bouncing all the way by going deep and bouncing up in the direction I wanted to go. I'd never go deeper than my trunk could reach. And if I did, I would bounce up, turn around, and bounce back towards the shallow so I wouldn't have to be in that precarious situation. I came out of the water. I felt the warm sun on my skin. And I went over to my mother. What are you thinking, Mom? Oh, nothing. Shibmathra, I have talked to you about the Ouroboros. There are a different kind of Ouroboros coming. I sat down on the beach. The Ouroboros were these little monkai, and they had, well, pretty much disappeared from what I understood. And they had become chimpanzees and bonobos and apes and gorillas. And I had never seen a monk ape, but what I understood was they were also kind of like the common ancestor between the monkey and the ape. The monk apes are gone, Mama. Well, there's a new ape coming. And this ape is very different from all the others. It's a tall one. It will walk on two legs, Shibmathra. It will have no hair. And it will change everything as we know it. Seemed like an odd description. An upright, hairless ape walking on two legs. Where will they come from, Mother? They will come from the ocean. You see, long, long time ago, all the way out here was land. There was a peninsula. And over time, as the great rains fell, the peninsula flooded and became many islands. The Ouroboros, and they were given the name Ouroboros by the sound they made as their distress call, which was Ouroboros, Ouroboros, Ouroboros. I kind of chuckled as my mother described it to me. And that's why we call them the Ouroboros. We don't have a name for them, but they'll be very different than the Ouroboros. And these are stories passed down from the Alpha and the other Alpha from the beginning of time. You see, we have been on the land a very long time. You know, we were once a mouse. This is why we don't kill the mice, because that there is grandfather. I looked over at a little field mouse running by. They found odd that I could ever have grown out of such a small little thing. But I understood. There's Grandpa running along. Where's Father? I turned and asked my mom. He has returned. When is he coming? He won't be coming, Shibmathra. He has returned to the origin. I didn't understand what she meant. You see, the Ouroboros have arrived. They've been here for quite some time. I didn't want to alarm you, but your father and his brothers went to meet the Ouroboros. What do you mean, meet? To stomp them out, to crush them. And they have not returned. I fear the worst. When you become of age, you will have to do the ritual of sight. In this ritual, you will consume the great ones. The great ones was the name given to the mushrooms that grew out of our feces. Those great ones would allow you to see things, Shibmathra, and you, and only you, are allowed to eat them because you are the Omega. Only the Alpha and Omegas are allowed to eat the great ones. They will give you great sight. And for 2 days, you will eat them. They don't taste very well, but regardless, you'll consume them to a point where you can no longer barely walk. You'll know when the time is right, when you'll have to be propping yourself up. The great ritual failed us at the last blood moon. And before I leave, I must teach you the ritual that maybe we can banish the Ouroboros back to the place they came. I didn't understand. Okay, I said. But I don't know why I can't be a dolphin. Why can't I just be a dolphin? Why do I need to have all these responsibilities, Mama? Because you're the Omega. I don't know what the Omega is, Mama, but I don't think I want to be her. I want to be a dolphin. She smiled at me, and her big trunk wrapped over me, and I could feel the weight of it and the comfort of feeling the weight of my mother's trunk all on my back. And she brushed it back and forth, rubbing, and it felt so good. Tell me the story of the Ouroboros, Mama. Tell me the story on how they became this standing one, the one that now is here, the one that threatens to devour everything, the one who will usher in the Ouroboros. The Ouroboros will usher in the Ouroboros. It seems confusing, but one is the name of the creature, the other is the name of the thing that will devour the planet. That thing today we would call capitalism, our business model. That thing ultimately is an unsustainable, insatiable monster. You can think of it as, Wall Street. You can think of it as our banking system. But what drives and starts everything is the startup. Now, obviously, Shibmathra wouldn't understand any of that. And it wouldn't be until her last incarnation as UnDaoDu and the fifth age that she would. And she would understand the tools that she would have to create and bring about in order to cut the head of the Ouroboros and maybe, just maybe, save humanity. Un DaoDu, Un Dao. Urabora were something like a meerkat. They pretty much existed everywhere. And two, they had a common ancestor of the field mouse. Both us and the Ouroboros have a grandfather, and that is the mouse. And the mouse is what survived after the dinosaurs, which you've seen and played with, those bones. And they went extinct because of a big event that lit up the sky and froze the planet, and they were no longer. The field mouse was able to go underground and emerge and was very successful. And over time, they emerged and split. And basically they grew up, one went pig and one went the monk guy. And the monk guy evolved into all the primates and the monkeys that we know today. Now, one group ended up getting trapped on a peninsula, and as the floods came, they got broken up into many islands. And there was one particular island, you could call it Atlantis, or as we call it today, Atlantis, was at the Goldilocks location, just far enough to keep the monk apes there, but close enough, should anything ever happen, they would be able to make it to land. One of the reasons why there's so many different hominoids that have visited Africa, including the Neanderthals and Lucy and the Homo habilis and Homo habilis and Homo erectus and all these myriad of hominoids, is because there were just different iterations of the monkey that had evolved on the islands, and as basically waters rose, they were pushed off these islands onto the mainland. One of the earliest being the Neanderthals, which went up to Europe and created their own subspecies that broke away, right? Some 300,000 years ago, the great event happened, which was a great melting of ice in the Mediterranean area that caused avalanche of water go flying down the Nile, the Gulf estuary, and wrecking the island. Pretty much like if you were to take a wave on a sandcastle on the beach and like push it up on it and flooding over. And it was this event that caused what we called Homo erectus, us, right? The species of ape, great ape that we are, to arrive. Now you have to understand, islands is where radical genetic evolution happens. And the reason for that is because the pressures are different on an island. Giant hornets developed on an island. The birds of paradise develop on an island. Radical evolution happens on islands. Thus, we are an example of this radical evolution. We are, you could say, a semi-aquatic ape. What I like to call us an Easter Island ape. Easter Island is an island in which a species of man existed and then there are no more. So the Easter Island ape is, imagine if that island was at the perfect location for the development of the monkai into us over a period of 20 million years. And ultimately, because of sea level rises, and the island now is underwater, we were able to evolve. Now, let me talk about that evolvement. And let's talk about how it happened. There was 3 tribes of monk apes on this island, or monkai on this island. And they controlled different resources, and they would fight for these resources. And they were a matriarch society. And if you want to get a good idea of what the monk apes' life was like, watch Meerkat Manor, which was done by the BBC over 12 years, and learn about Shakespeare and all the other, monk apes and their stories. The meerkats are the closest thing what we have today as a monkai, right? And the reason why it's a matriarchal society was because ultimately we had to preserve sustain ourselves by not having too many babies and create the Easter Island event, right? So there was very strict on how many children. And the matriarch of each family would decide who'd have children. Well, obviously, things happened. And in our case, what happened in our case was called the Princess and the Hero. The youngest daughter of the matriarch of the largest Monkeye tribe was in love with the hero. And you can think of Shakespeare as the hero if you watch Meerkat Manor. And they had a little fling, and she got pregnant. Now, he didn't want to have the fling. She came up on him, and she was, and she just had an itch that needed to scratch, and he scratched it. Wow. And ultimately, as a result of that scratching, we are here today. Had we not scratched that itch, right? And if it would have been, and probably there was countless of other, trying to get a beer out of here. I'm coughing here. And flip this around. UnDaoDu, UnDaoDu, UnDaoDu. UnDaoDu. So the monkey of Shakespeare, the hero and the princess, and you can think of the best friend, right, were banished from the tribe. And there was really nowhere for them to go. I mean, it was death for sure. So they were wandering around, and he was grabbing, very little food. They were sleeping, and there was hawks and other things that were predators. But by this time, there were very few actual predators, like if any, cougars or leopards or anything else, because there was on an island, and it just, as the waters rose, they would flee from the island, right? So pretty much all the predators had left long time ago. So there was really just these monkeys that pretty much dominated, and hawks were a problem because they would be able to fly out that way, and snakes, obviously, and scorpions, and I mean, there was plenty of chances to die, but there was no big cats or anything else, on the island. So the only place where for the hero and the princess and the best friend to go was the beach, and the beach. If you look at the island of there's an island off the coast of Ethiopia, and this island off the coast of Ethiopia has it's radical. It's like prehistoric. It's like time had stopped there. And there was these huge long beaches there, and very desolate, and the trees, very few trees, and everything else. And on this island, human remains from 3 million years ago were found. That's because that island was once attached to Africa. Now, that's not the island that we evolved on. That was actually a close island. It was a further island out that we ultimately evolved on. And that island now is no more. It's underwater. So what happened was the little family there was on the beach and starving, hungry, and the hero saw this big old crab and decided to fight it, and eat it because he was so hungry, and it was huge. It nearly got him, and he went to grab basically a vine to get away to pull, and it was a stick, and he basically grabbed the driftwood, which he thought was a vine, and whacked the crab, killing it. And I have a very vivid memory of that event, right? And it was this epic battle between, the hero and the big crab. Um, and he smashes it, but none of the others would want to eat it. But he was so hungry that he started to eat the crab. And even though it was the most disgusting thing he had put in his mouth, it did have a great effect on his stomach. And he ended up picking up his little lucky thing, his stick. And that's how the monk apes evolved to use a stick. Now they had to use sticks to like stick into the ground, played around with it. They would like think it was a toy. But this was cool. You had reach. You could whack the thing. So for the next day, the hero would go around just whacking things with a stick. Whack, 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 whack. It was just like imagine a chimpanzee finding it. And it was his lucky stick. He knew he probably would have died if it wasn't for that stick. Well, fast forward, years, and the three became a family. And what they would go, the two boys would go out and they started getting a harem. They got more girls, women, and the princess ultimately became the matriarch of the tribe. And over time, they grew on a seafood diet. They got used to eating, and no one would mess with them. All the other monk apes on the island, the three other families, they were the fourth family, right? Or maybe they were the third family. There was two families on the island, and they were the third. The two were fighting each other. That makes more sense. So Un Dao and Du, and there were Un and the Dao and the Du. She was from the Dao, and the third family established the Du. So over millions of years, because of diet of and I don't know if you know that, but basically seafood has the fatty acids for the development of the brain. And over time, we would, stay on the beach where it was safe. We could swim. No other monk apes would, if they would come and attack us, we'd just go in the water, climb the trees. And we have plenty of food. There was always stuff, dead fish and other things. Obviously, there were sharks that would periodically get us. So we learned to be, have watchers. And fast forward a million years, we take over the island. And we're that successful, we start moving from island to island as we push off other, princesses and heroes as they get dislocated. And the hominoids move. And obviously back then it wasn't hard to move from island to island. They were probably still just, shallows. You could see them, short islands. But over time, over millions of years, we're talking 20 million years, we evolved to what we are today. We have body fat on us that's similar to blubber. Only seals and other things have our blubber. That blubber is to insulate us against the cold of the water. We lost most of our hair on our body because hair is friction and we were swimming and underwater, so we would lose most of that. And we would have hair on our head because it would be the one sticking out of the water, and with the cold air, hitting, it was there as protection on it. And also the sun, right? We didn't want the sun baking our head. So the sun was the air was there to protect against the sun as we lived in the water, or we worked in the water. Our nose became ridged for diving for crab, and diving for seaweed, and diving into the water. And we ended up getting web. If you look at our hands, we have web between our fingers, and that again is a swimming, right? A swimming technique on it. And most importantly, as our thumb, unlike we're the only species that have a dislocated thumb. And the reason for that is picking out fish bones and picking out things. It's really an inconvenience. So over time, our thumbs were used because we're always picking out, the bones out of fish and, and adapting from, choking. The other thing is, you notice that we're the only ape which has basically an offspring which is completely useless. And the reason for that is simple. It's like, the mom would just have birth the child, make a temporary cot in the sand under a tree, right? Lay the child on its back in there, and then would go off, hunting for food, and then returning and feeding the child, with breast milk and everything else. And it was perfectly fine. It didn't have to climb. We were on the beach. There wasn't that many trees. It was just like, we lived a good life. So these are all explanations that comes out of that I've adapted from Elaine Morgan. So if you ever want to learn more about the aquatic ape, check out Elaine Morgan. And however, Elaine Morgan never made the connection to the island, Easter Island, right? And I wrote her once, and I said to Elaine, I said, "Hey, I've got this theory that it was Easter Island ape. It was this, and she loved it and says, listen, if I ever write another book, I would include it." And however, she never did write another book. So the theory of the semi-aquatic ape or Easter Island ape, until now, has never been told. So through my chant channeling, I've traveled and I've seen these adventures, or I may have just used my imagination because of Meerkat Manor, but I can see the evolution and the experiences and everything that manifested itself through the evolution of us in this situation. So some 300,000 years ago, we were forced off the island by a natural event onto land. The other thing that would happen in October 8th, 9th, and 10th of every year for 1,000 years until we landed on the coast was that to be the event. The world would seem to shake, and we'd have this howling, and we had the greatest fear that there was monsters living out there. Well, it wasn't monsters; it was the Shadu awoke mammoths trying to keep us on the island. You have to understand that we weren't awoke, right? We were still we hunted and everything else is and we had the family tribe, and we didn't even come up with art until 30,000 years ago. So the Sadhu awoke mammoths knew we would coming, and the reason they knew is they would do psilocybin, and they would eat massive amount, or the alpha, the matriarch of the family known as the alpha, would do that. My mother. And the ritual would start on October 8th because it was October 10th, some 300,000 years ago, that we arrived on the beach. She knew exactly when we were going to arrive, and she knew because she would basically travel the psilocybin, gateways into God knows what you want to call it, into the cyber, into the, this world. And the ritual would go like this: they would eat. She would gorge herself. She would first, starve herself for a month, and then she would gorge herself on these massive psilocybin mushrooms growing out of the cow patty. I mean, our crap, our elephant dung. And she would do this basically for two entire days, just eating, moving from patty to patty. They would be collected for her when she couldn't, she became too stoned, to a point where all she can do is she's propping herself up with her massive trunk, and she's doing this circle, and ultimately kind of drawing this circle, into the ground, the Ouroboros, the circle. And then she would get to a point where she would start stomping on one of the sides of the circle, just constantly creating the head. And that was a representation of the Ouroboros. Right? And she's stomping on that. And all the other elephants would start to stomp too and start imitating her. And this would spread from, tribe to tribe until the entire planet of elephants, right, of mammoths that lived all over the world. You have to understand that the mammoths were the ones that created the Silk Road and all the other roads. They were the ones that created the land bridge from Japan all the way to Canada, right? If you look at her flight, and as a way, because they didn't want to go up to Alaska and over to the north, they cut over, right? So they created that land bridge by moving dirt, right? Just by with their trunks, just slowly moving dirt. It took 1,000 years to create, but to them, what is that, right? Every time they went there, they would move it. They'd go back and they'd go about their thing, and they just kept moving until they got it built all the way to the other side. Now, if you look at it, it's all broken apart and everything else, but there was that bridge, and it was the mammoths that created that. So you have to imagine on the third day, the entire planet is shaking by the pounding of these hooves, and they start to howl. Ooh, these deep, thundering voices. And we would be sitting on the island, and we'd hear the shaking, and it was like there was a monster out there. And we were scared fucking shitless. And that little technique, for thousands of years, kept us on the island, right? Because we could have arrived earlier. It kept us there. And it created the myth of Leviathan, of Cthulhu, of, what's the big Leviathan and the Kraken, right? These big monsters were spawned in our minds because of the sound, what the mammoths would do. Well, like I said, a natural event happened. We were pushed off the island. We had dolphins as friends, just as the mammoths had dolphins, and we had land. Now, you have to understand that the division of the bull elephants from the herd, right? The event that caused that, now that no bull elephants stay with the herd, you can think of the event as when the brothers met. Because you imagine if you were awoke and you knew that these little fuckheads were going to land and destroy and kill everything, you'd go out and meet them, right? You are a conscious entity that understands that these little fucking monkeys, right? These monkey, these apes, these great apes, were going to land and destroy you, not only you, all the species, the planet, and everything. So, of course, you would ultimately, go set out to destroy them. Now, the thing is that, you would think as a massive, elephant, that you wouldn't have a problem, right, destroying these. So, these creatures. Well, the thing is that they didn't know is that we, as Homo erectus, had developed the javelin. The javelin was a fishing tool. It was designed for fishing, and it was there to kill. It was aerodynamic. It could go into the water, and ultimately it was and it was deadly. It was the ballistic missile. It was the nukes of 300,000 years ago, and it's ultimately what made us a super predator. And that fishing tool that we had developed for fishing became, or like a harpoon, right? Developed as like a harpoon, developed into the slaying, javelin that we have today. So, when my father, now I'm talking to Shibmathra, and her brothers confronted, the family was weak. It was the great matriarch and the three daughters, right? You can think of Eve, founding Eve, and her three daughters, and we're coming on, and there on the beach are these three massive bull elephants, and we had never seen an elephant before. So they were monsters to us, and they came charging at us, and ultimately, in the process of the big fight, the great mother perished, leaving just the three daughters. And in the three daughters create the three tribes of man. I always wonder, what if it would have been my mother, who would have gone there and acted all like a or me, and we could have gone there and made friends with these, with us. What kind of world if we could have had harmony, right? And the answer is it wouldn't have worked because they weren't awoke. They were predators, and we had set up this whole failure because of what we were doing, keeping them on. So, on the island, by doing the whole ritual and everything else, I truly believe that, and in an alternate universe where we were trying to befriend them, it wouldn't have happened. They would have still probably attacked us thinking we were monsters, unfortunately. So my father and my brothers, and understand an elephant is really hard because I'm talking as a mammoth, I'm talking as an elephant because of the era of time. Anyone who's a direct descendant, I mean, I can say father and talking as a mouse, right? There is no time to these creatures. Time doesn't exist. This idea of time is actually something that we ushered in. So when I have these memories, it's like I move through different times, but I'm still that thing, right? So imagine if you were not tied to time, and you have all these experiences and all these memories and everything you have, but you're talking about it, but then you realize, wait, I'm talking, and then you're trying to put the time element to it to try to pin it down to what point in time was I, because I'm just moving through my epigenetic memories. My epigenetic memories don't have timestamps on them, okay? They're just there in my these genetic memories are there, and they don't have, I mean, if we look at them technically, we could say there's a timestamp, but the idea of time is something that we created. Time is an invention of us, right? Anyway, so that is how the Ouroboros, or us, evolved and ended up in Africa. We slayed the and that there, what I described to you, is the first part of the book of Un. That's the first part. So everything I just told you is in the first book of Un. That second chapter starts now with the point of view of the three sisters. My mother, right? My grandmother, and the three sisters were Shadu, Shara, and Shanu, right? Shadu, Shadu, Shanu, and Shara, right? So the oldest of the three was Shadu, Un Dao Du is the direct family, right? Eve, the oldest of the daughters, and she was a pagan. And if you think of Vikings, that kind of look, she believed in the ancient ones, right? In the tree and in the land and the oceans, the monsters, right? It wasn't Cthulhu, right? The great monster was like a demon like thing. And then in their territory settled in Africa. Shanu ultimately would establish the Sumerian tribes across the Gulf there, over where the Sumerians and the towards the Fertile Valley. But back then, everyone lived on the coast. And then Shara, the youngest, would move up the Isle and create the monotheists. So it was the pagan, the polytheist, and the monotheist gods. The three foundings of all the religions we have today stems from the three sisters of the Great Mother, who had perished on the arrival to land by the mammoths, creating the conflict between man and world. And the three sisters wanted revenge on the mammoths, right? The mammoths were now, were needed to be killed, especially the matriarch of the family, right? So, but then again, maybe my father and his brothers were just in heat, and they were just saw it, so, I believe that they went there, be classic men, right? I'm going to take care of this. I'm not going to mess around. We're going to stomp out these little fuckers before they stomp us out, right? Or before they kill us. So ultimately, yeah. So from the the three tribes arrived. They get decimated by the elephants. They kill the elephants, right? And they drive one off. They kill two of them and drive one off. And they cower along the shore in the fear of this huge mass island. We would always stay on the ocean, and this is supported by the Journey of Man, the book called The Journey of Man, that tracked our DNA and found the oldest DNA on the island I talked about, which was the closest island to our island of origin, the Goldilocks Island, the aquatic ape, or the Easter Island ape, right? We grew up Easter Island monkey. And the reason why we have no record of us being here longer than 240,000 years ago is because all the evidence is washed away. We hugged and lived on the coast. We were semi-aquatic apes. We were afraid to go inland. And the tribes, as we grew really successful, we just kept moving and growing, and we just stayed along the coast, moving north and moving south. Until we followed the rivers into the fertile valley, and we call that the cradle of civilization, right? But pretty much the entire journey of man, and we arrived, for example, around 30,000 years ago, we arrived in Australia, right? And I think 12 or 15,000 years in New Zealand. So we were seafaring, apes. We felt very comfortable. We could navigate. We could smell the wind. We probably had relationships with the dolphins to migrate. So we adapted very well, especially because we had that super weapon for fishing. And as long as we're along the coast, we could always find food, find rivers. Rivers would give us water. And we were very, very successful, right? And over time, we started moving inwards, and that inward movement would start around 240,000 years ago, and that's where the evidence of us, really is clear, because we're starting to move inward and land and exploring what's inside, what's in there. And I grew up on an island on a beach, and as a child, I was always interested in what's on the other side. It's kind of a natural thing in your DNA to want to explore that next corner. And I remember as a child always, and I'd be with my dog Issa moving around the coast. I always felt comfortable around the coast, around the water, and exploring that next corner. What's around that next corner? What's around that next corner? And I remember that very vividly. And as a species, that's just part of our, that's embedded, this desire, right? And the families moved. And over thousands of years, this evolution happened. Going back into, 200, 300,000 years ago is, the DaoDu, or maybe it was 40,000 years or 30,000 years. Again, time is not something that it's hard for me to equate time in these visions, in these things, because of the concept of time. Really, we didn't have one. So the second part of the book of Un is the development of DaoDu, and DaoDu was basically one of 20 special children born out of the blood moon ritual. And this blood moon ritual basically would have the three tribes come together once on the blood moon, right? Which happened like every 12 years. And it would be this massive orgy. So the tribes would come together. Basically, the chieftains of the tribes would impregnate all the young women, right? The fertile women, who then would give birth to these warriors, the tribe's warriors. Then these women would be sacrificed, right? And the children would be raised by the hunting, and they would be part of the hunting, right? They would be kind of like the dogs initially. And over time, they would grow up and become the actual hunters. And then that's how they evolved, in the hunters in the tribe, and eventually would get to a certain age, would take wives and other things, and then every 12 years it would repeat, right? This ritual. And the Shadu, Shara, Shanu, right? Shadu, Shanu, Shara, Shad, Shadu, Shanu, Shara. Un DaoDu, UnDaoDu, UnDaoDu, UnDaoDu. UnDaoDu, And in the second part, it starts with the story of DaoDu and the 19 and the struggle. So you learn about each of the characters, and some of the main characters in the story. They're broken up into like micro tribes within it, and you have the twins, which now represent the Winklevoss twins. You have DaoDu, which is Joe Lubin, Ethereum's big, right? So they were kind of the clique right there. You had Mihao Lisi, and you'd have Mikhail, Mitao Du, and you have Vitao Du, right? All have Du because that represents the family. And Vitao was this master, like his spirit through time was the individual that brought about technology. All these different technologies seemed to be the same lineage, and what he brought in was the ability to work with flint way back, right? So flint comes from Vitao, the line of Vitao. And the tools, it's like the evolution of the tools and stuff. It was like his thing. The javelin came from the family of Vitao, right? Just as Ethereum and the blockchain came from the family of Vitao, the engineering of BitTorrent, right? So you can think of the Gutentao press would come from the Vitao. So all the technology, kind of cool, technology that we have ever comes from this line, right? That has spread and moved, but it's all of Vitao. And in the story, Vitao is making the bone, and he's like, I am going to be able to throw the javelin further than DaoDu, because that was the thing. Like DaoDu had these really long arms because the length of the arm allowed him to throw the javelin really far, and no one could throw the javelin further than DaoDu. That was his thing, right? He wasn't huge or big, but he could just had the right shape to throw the javelin. And the older ones always wanted to wrestle, like who would be the leader, right? And so there's this event in the book where they get pressured by DaoDu to make a decision. He said, I tell you what, whoever can throw the javelin further enough ultimately will lead the family, right? And they laughed. I mean, are you joking? Vittel, he can't throw. No, it's okay. So Vittel has his damn bone, and that dude had been watching him develop this bone, and everyone was like, what, he crazy, and they're like, okay. So so there's this javelin throwing, and Vittel has his bone. He's fumbling with his bone, and ultimately he throws and he beats them all, because they built the throwing arm, and that's the bone is what they use as an extension, right? And that is how DaoDu became. He's like, well, you're a leader now, Vital. You lead. No, I'm not lead. You are. I give you. So the leadership was given to. So and another time there's Bokdu, which is Brock Pierce. And he is very like opinionated, like this is it, and always taking the lead on things. And he nearly gets gouged by by a wild pig, killed, and it is Dadu that saves and takes the hit. It nearly dies, right, for his for what happens to Bokdu, and so there's all these little stories about the 19, right, that can develop into them, and every one of the 19, the four um, can lead to these stories. And there's only a few that I've channeled, like Bokdu and Jokdu, and the rest. Um, I know who they are around the blockchain, but I don't know their stories, right, from back then. The big event is when the slaying of the alpha, or of the great matriarch. She is spotted on the beach with her child, and the family, wanting revenge. And this is at the end of the book of right? The undoing of, and at the same time, where it ends with the alpha, is the whole thing where Shibmathra gets frustrated and says, "Why don't you, you're big, why can't you just deal with him and kill him, and be gone with it?" And her mother has her destroy this huge termite mound as a lesson that some things you just can't stomp out. Um, and and it's a lesson that she doesn't even learn. I mean, she doesn't get until her very death, when she's face to face in the book of UnDaoDu, with UnDaoDu now, right? And that is when the essence of her her life, right, her Buddha-ness, transfers into the human Buddha. So she moved her essence, because she was gone. There was going to be no more animal Buddhas, and that essence moved to UnDaoDu, the first of the human Buddha. And that story happens in the book of Du. In the killing of the great matriarch, what happens is she had seen her death, and the moment she sees the torches up, she grabs Shibmathra, and like a discus thrower, whips her around and throws out as far as she could, 500 meters out into the ocean. She's like, and Shibmathra is spinning in the air, and as she's spinning in the air, she sees UnDaoDu coming up and taking Vital's spear and shoving it through the shoulder blades right into the heart of her mother, killing her. And that defining moment, that defining rage, is the whole part of the book of Dao, right? UnDao. In the book of Dao, it basically is with Shibmathra, actually, and her family gets taken back by the family. They leave Africa. They take the old Silk Road, and they move. And the book of Dao starts with that. Back to the book of it ends with the battle, and it's when Dadu becomes UnDaoDu. They had slain the great mother, right? The next day was the big blood moon sacrifice, and the three tribes were competing for domination. And it was, so there was, imagine this triangle carved out of the dirt. And if you ever watch, there's these Indonesian guys that build these amazing places themselves, right? Amazing. So imagine, 20, 30, 100, 200 of them doing this. They built this amazing sand sculpture that now, over time it gets destroyed. They can't last. They're just dug out of, sand, and they're probably good for, for a little, for a year or two, but eventually I'll return to it. But in this case, you had this triangle, each this massive triangle, curved down into the ground. Above, looking from each corner, is each of the families equally. So it's a perfect triangle, right? And they're all equal, and they're trying to determine who's going to be the spokesperson, right? And the oldest daughter thinks it should be her, but the two younger daughters are pushing back, saying no, it needs to be, because she has the pagan gods, and the other one has the poly gods, the many gods, and the other one has the one god. And they all are saying that their religion, right, is the right religion, right? So this obviously is about 30,000 years ago, when this event happened. And just like the Bible, right, I can imagine that people lived a really long time. That may be true, that we lived for um, those biblical ages. Who knows? Or on the other side, it's just another iteration, like it's further down. Time to me in this story doesn't really matter, right? The events matter, not like when in the timeline they matter. Just they happen. So in the event, you know, um, UnDaoDu is staring, and there's the two others. One's a female, right, of the tribe of Ra, and the other is this big, guy from the tribe of Nu. So the tribe of Du, the tribe of Nu, and the tribe of Ra, right? That's Shadu, Nu, and Shara. So the um, the fight happens, and what UnDaoDu does is he's Dadu. He's not UnDaoDu yet. He sprints as hard as he can to his spear, because all the weapons are in the middle. So they start, and they have to sprint to their weapons in the middle, right? Get their weapons and fight it out. It was like, everyone else is like, yeah, it's like this fucking Super Bowl event. And each sister glaring at each other, and the chieftain is there. I mean, she's the high, and the blood moon is up in the sky. It's nighttime, and the fires, and all of the kids are like doused in the blood of the alpha, Shibmathra's mother. The big head is there behind, Shadu. She's like, yeah, I've got the head. I'm going to be the one. Everything to intimidate the others. And and there's this epic fight scene, and how I remember it, see it, or imagine it, is UnDaoDu sprints there. He's ahead of the pack. They just kind of hold back, and he has to dive for the spear, because the girl, they're 12 years old. All these kids around 12 years are all 12 years old, same age as Shibmatra at the time, right? When her mother dies, when she gets thrown out in the water, just 12-year-old, just a young elephant, right? And he barely grabs it with his tips of his fingers, and he swishes it around, right? And he slices the throat of the girl, right? That's about to friggin' stab him with her knife. She has her knife. She's lunging, for him, and he does his like whip around and just cuts his throat. He rolls, right? And now he's like facing this huge, this bodybuilding, big guy, and he's about to bring the axe down, and he plants the spear, and he runs right through his neck. And now he's in the middle of two groups, and he's wielding the spear around like a crazy guy, screaming, right, getting their attention. But in the meantime, they're all, they're like stopped and backed off and grabbing their weapons, and like, what the fuck do we do? Both their leaders are dead. And Dadu is basically keeping them off the weapons. And his tribe comes in, and they get their daggers and their weapons and everything. And there's this fight, and they pretty much slay them all pretty quick. So, they're all dead. And, all the young kids are panning in there, and then everyone's like, yeah, and the other ones are quiet. But there's this scream, like, we are the one. And then Shadu stands up, and she bangs her staff down. and the moon is burning and the torches are there and it's this dark and, and it's just, and she says, there can be only one. There must be one, because she doesn't want, she wants DaoDu dead, because she had seen in the visions her death. She had seen that the face of her killer was DaoDu. She'd been haunted by these dreams. And DaoDu was like, he was awoke, right? He understood. He was in, the self, he was a kind of savant and awoke. And he's like, no, I'm not killing my brothers and sisters. We're not going to do this. No. And he throws down his spear in defiance of Shadu. And Shadu just like, you are unworthy. You are underling. You are nothing, right? And you are UnDaoDu, and his title Un. And it's the it's like him being kicked out of the tribe, right? Kicked out of the family. Kill the Un. And Bokdu was like, no, DaoDu, you are the one. You're the one, right? And Bokdu takes his dagger that even to this day he carries around his neck, and he basically cuts himself in the throat and kills him. Nani, I'll make a video talking. Toshita. So Cheryl wants me to probably do the laundry. I mean, not laundry, the kitchen. And at that very moment, Jakdu and Bokdu kills the other, kills the other kind of core group of DaoDu, and really go for him to kill him, right? They were like, oh, we'll fight, and they start fighting amongst themselves, and in a fit of rage, and a lot of the, some of them were like, oh, we're not going to fight. They just kind of went down, and brought UnDaoDu. Now he's UnDaoDu, right? He just got renamed UnDaoDu. Kills Jakdu and the twins, like these, pretty easily. He picks his picks and kills them, and the rest of them like UnDaoDu, and their hands are open, and DaoDu, in a fit of rage, sacrifices and kills them all by himself, and he's, and he is there alone, and all the rest, nothing they can do. Is like, I am the one. He is the one, right? So he becomes in a way, the intermediary between all the three sisters, and he would live outside. He wouldn't be given. He was shunned. No one would look at him. He was just nothing to the tribe, and he would sleep basically outside, and was like a dog to Shadu, and she was like UnDaoDu, and that ends the book of UnDaoDu, and I will leave it there because it's a long fucking talk, and I need to go do the dishes. UnDaoDu. 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 UnDaoDu.